A man is eating with his wife, while his maid is in the distance watching them. The maid, then, looks like she was very hungry. The man then tells his wife that the food was very good and thanks her. The woman then said that it was really good, but the person who prepared that food was the maid. The man then said he needed to get back to work, so he gets up from the table. The woman then said that she also needed to get back to work and she also got up from the table. They then pass the maid and she goes into the kitchen. Arriving in the kitchen, the maid says that she was very hungry. She then looks for a pot. The maid then picks up what you bosses had left on the plate and starts putting it in the pot. She then begins to say that her life has been very difficult since her mother got sick. She said that all the food she got from her bosses, she took it to her mother, which made her very happy. The maid then says that things have been very difficult since she had no money to buy food. She then says that she was sure that God would help her and that everything would work out in the end. She then says that that soup was good and that she couldn't complain, since even if it was leftovers, it was still food. The woman then goes to her husband. He then asks what happened and says he was working. The woman then says that her husband would not believe what she had seen, and he asks what it was. The woman then said that she had just seen the maid take the rest of their food. The Tom man said he was disappointed in his maid, as she couldn't take home the food he bought for them. The woman then said that she was not believing what her husband was saying. She says their maid was taking the rest of his food and wasn't stealing from them. She then said that her husband should be a little more considerate as she was just getting the rest of the food. The man said he didn't mind as the woman was getting food from inside her house. He then tells his wife to sort it out, as he didn't want to hear about it anymore. The woman then tells him to think about what he was talking about. The woman then says that he was right when he said that she would settle the matter. She says that she was the one who paid the woman's salary and it was she who took the maid to work there. She then said that the maid had said that her mother was very sick, so she must have been using her salary to buy medicine and that was causing her not to have money to buy food. The man then asks what he had to do with that, since his wife paid the maid's salary. She had to make do with that and not steal food from her house. The woman then says that she is impossible to talk to her husband. She then said she would sort it out with the maid. The man then tells her to leave him alone. Meanwhile, the maid was in the kitchen eating the remains of her boss's food. She then thanks God and says she was very hungry. At that moment, the woman arrives and said that she needed to talk to the maid. The maid then asks her boss not to fight with her, as she was very hungry. A woman then says that what the maid was doing was wrong and she said she knew, but that she had to as she was so hungry. He then asks her boss not to send her away, as she only had that job. The woman then said that she wasn't going to send her away, but says that wasn't right as she was eating leftover food. She then asks what happened to the food they had given her. The maid then says that she took food to her mother, because the medicines she took, in addition to being very expensive, were very strong. She said it made her very weak so she needed to eat. She then said that if she had to choose between her mother and her, she would choose her mother. The woman then asks why the employee didn't tell him earlier. Afterwards, they could have helped her. The maid then says that she thought about letting her bosses know, but that when she had told the man, he ended up bringing it to her attention, so she didn't want to talk about it anymore. She then says that the salary she received was very good, but that because the medicines were very expensive, she ended up not having money for anything. The woman then said that her husband could not do that to the maid, because the woman had hired her. She then said that she paid the woman's salary so she should have told her. The maid then says that she was very afraid that the man would send her away. She then said that she needed that job so she could pay for her mother's medicine and her rent. The woman then says that her husband couldn't fire her, but at that moment, the man comes up and asks what she was talking about. The woman then says that she was resolving the matter that her husband had no empathy to resolve. She then says that her maid was eating their leftovers and that she had mentioned it to him, but that her husband had not been able to mention it to her so that they could work it out together. The man then says that he had already said that he did not buy food for his maid to steal from him. The maid then says that she didn't want the two to fight, then says that she didn't have to do that for her. She then says that she was leaving, but the woman tells her not to leave. The man then asks why she was saying that, but the woman says he was the one who would leave. She then says that the man was a very bad person with no empathy and says that she didn't know how she got married to him. She then tells him to get out of her house. She tells him to go away, along with his selfishness. The man then asks if she was sure about that, as she was siding with the maid and not her husband. She then says that she would side with a person who needed her help, not a selfish person. She then yells at the man to get out of her house. He then says okay and leaves. The maid then apologizes to the woman and says that she had no intention of causing this to happen. The woman then said that she didn't need to apologize, as she had helped her understand what kind of person her husband was. The maid then apologizes and says that she didn't do that on purpose. She then says she didn't mean to take their leftovers. The woman then tells her to stop that and says that she would raise the maid's salary in order to help her. She then says that she had some doctor friends who could help with her mother's treatment and that she also had some pharmacist friends who could help the maid get medicine for her mother. She then says that the maid had helped her understand who her husband really was. This makes the employee very happy and she asks if her boss would really do that for her. She then thanks the woman and says that she had saved her mother's life. The woman then says that she loved her maid's happy manner and asks her to give her a hug.